Hello, welcome. In the beginning, there was me, Dr. Roger Gewolb, and welcome to The Gospel According to Dr. Roger, the program where you get the unbridled, unvarnished truth about everything that's going on in the news, all the stories, all the big names, what's it really all about? And not just from me, but from my guests too, I promise. And tonight, we've got a great example. We have Dave Atherton, who is a very well-known and well-liked journalist and commentator. A second career for him, actually, after something like 36 years recruiting people for computer companies. Go figure that out. Anyway, he's very good and very popular and very opinionated, and he's got some very strong views. And he will give you the truth, his version, about those topics we're going to discuss tonight, which will be wide-ranging, scan the planet and the entire spectrum, of news stories that are out today. So, with no further ado, as they say, let's welcome Dave. So, welcome, Dave. It's great to have you on the program. You are
Nice to be here.
You are a well-known and much liked character around the broadcast town. In your
You're very kind. Thank you.
in your second career after being a recruiter for computer companies, and you're kind of all over the place, and you've got very decent followings of follower numbers and um, opinions on everything, in my experience. So let's talk about a couple of them. Tell me, to begin, what about the state of the world and the state of this island of ours?
Oh well, I thought you said 20 minutes, not 20 hours. You know, well, let's go for something conceptual that we'll drill down to the specifics in a moment. You know, if you look at any of the great powers that ever existed, the Ottoman Empire, the Mongol Empire, the British Empire, of course, you know, the Aztec and Inca empires, they all rise and they all fall. And Britain is probably, I'm not saying terminal decline, but it's certainly very much in relative decline. No, I saw a video from PragerU University, and they said probably Britain will only ever be the only hyperpower as opposed to superpower that ever existed when we ruled a fifth of the world's landmass and a quarter of the world's population. You know, and the great thing about British Empire and British colonialism is that if you look like any other empire that's risen, it was based at the end of a sword, and there's obviously much death and suffering. And you know, you take the Germans, you know, the Francis Napoleon Bonaparte, you know, waged war in Europe for 20 years. And you got the Germans who waged war from 1914 to 1945, 30 years. Most superpowers and most powerful nations have used their strength to cause war or make war.
Yeah.
But you know, when Britain was the world's only superpower, if not hyperpower, we were more interested in making money and doing trade, and you know, they were selling our cotton to India and America and places like that.
They were smart, like Trump, who wants nothing more than peace,
Exactly,
because he realizes
yeah.
that he wants nothing more than peace,
Yeah.
because he realizes with peace you have
Yeah.
domestic stability and good relations between neighbors.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, it was like, you know, what I'm saying is we could have waged mass industrial war against anybody in the world, and we would have won day in, day out because of our wealth and our strength. We chose not to do that. And
Yeah, and there isn't
gone?
a country in the world that hasn't been established by an act of war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, and we know we exported democracy, free trade, science. We built schools, hospitals. You know, we built 41,000 miles of railways in India. We introduced 8 times more land into agricultural use in India. eight times more land was able to produce food.
So
And
what went wrong?
what went wrong? I think liberalism went wrong. From what I can see, countries like India, it's the active middle classes that wanted to end independence. And maybe history was against us. Maybe times had changed. If you read Professor Niall Ferguson's book Empire on the British Empire, he says that Britain could have stayed out of World War II. The terms and conditions offered by Adolf Hitler were really, really good. And we basically the idea was that if we kept out of Europe, we could keep our empire. And at the end of the sort of 5-6 years of war in World War II, we were financially exhausted. We were completely bankrupt, and the fact we fought alone for such a long time, albeit with our empire, we paid the price for it, and effectively we fell on our sword for doing the right thing.
And what about now, right now, today, this new government and all the rest?
Yeah, indeed, yeah. It's again, going back to my original point about empires come and go. Normally, it's sort of pointed out, or normally there's weak leadership, and people, leaders that can't do the right thing. America is declining now. Look at Joe Biden, for example, and Kamala Harris. But with Britain post-war, we chose a socialist path with Clement Attlee. The Germans, for example, post-war, returned to classical liberalism. And by the time the 1961 had come around, their industrial production was greater than ours. Now we squandered all what we could have done post-war on socialism. Can you imagine a country having a prices and incomes policy whereby the government thinks it can set the price of goods and services and how much wages are going to be paid? It's absolute madness. It's the free market or nothing.
Yeah. Right. And anything else about Britain today and the new Labour government?
Oh, where we go. Well, now we're drilling down to specifics. No, but I was having this conversation the other day. Which are the truly great Conservative prime ministers? When it comes to sort of my style of politics, classical liberalism, economically, and maybe sort of small c Conservative when it comes to social issues. Apart from Winston Churchill and Baroness Thatcher, I can't think of any standout Conservative leader at all.
No.
In the 20th century. In the World War One, it was Lloyd George who was he was a liberal. He was a liberal who was in charge of the country in those days. In fact, probably the last great, to my mind, prime minister that we had, which would fit in with my ideology, is William Gladstone again, who was a liberal, what we now call a liberal Democrat.
Yeah.
No, appalling.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. But looking at Keir Starmer, I look upon him as a psychopath. He's politically a psychopath. I think 100 policies he's come up with, 2 I'm neutral about, 98 I'm particularly deadly opposed to. I just can't agree with him in a month of Sundays. And he is greatly exaggerating our decline, our influence. We're a laughingstock internationally. That Chagos Island still is an absolute disgrace. We're paying somebody a load of money to take an island off our own hand against the will of the people that live there.
Yeah.
That's absolutely disgraceful. It's like the 1,200 migrants that arrived. It's obvious the only thing you can do here is round them up, put them on the back of a border force vessel, take them back to Cali and say bugger off. That's the only way you can deal with it.
We're giving foreign people £1 billion a month, while we're cutting winter fuel payments, if they actually go ahead with that.
Well, sure.
What about Ukraine?
Right, Ukraine. I always put this caveat in. I'm no fan of Putin. I'm no fan of Putin. He's a nasty piece of work. He's a tyrant, and he bumps off people. Um, but I look upon Russian-Ukrainian war as it should be it's a war of the 20th century. It should not be a war of the 21st century. Um, whether there's the conspiracy
How do
theory,
you mean? What does that mean?
uh, the combatants, the competence. You're talking about a war of the 20th century.
Yeah. What
Okay,
does that statement mean, 20th and 21st?
okay, fine. The enemy Europeans face today, Russian, Ukrainian, Eastern, Western Europeans, and Britain, are two biggest threats, are not each other. They are militant Islam and China.
Right.
So therefore, we should not be fighting each other. We should be organizing ourselves into maybe the biggest NATO come Warsaw Pact to take on these two major foes.
So, in other words, Russia should see themselves, Putin should see Russia as part of the West.
Yes, yeah, if Russia was, it's probably a bit far fetched, and maybe there'd be more people more clued up on it more than me. That admitting Russia to NATO will be a complete and utter disaster. But then again, it's a permanent member of the United Nations. Stranger things have happened. But China and militant Islam are enemies, not each other.
Right, right. And what about Gaza?
Right, okay. Well, if I can echo the words of Nigel Farage, if you want to play who's first, Judaism goes back 5,000 years in what is now still Israel. Since the 1933 Peel Commission, where the suggestion was 70% of what is now Israel stroke Palestine should be given over to the Jews, and 83% is retained by the Arabs, which and the Arabs they rejected the deal outright. There's been 10 different occasions, right up to the Camp David of 2000, whereby the Israelis were going to make major concessions to the Palestinians, but Arafat walked away. I've read the words of Bill Clinton, and in the end, Arafat just turned around and said, "No, no, 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 no." It's like the war in Ukraine and Russia. The leaders just seem to want to have a perpetual war. Is it for financial gain or for kudos gain? I don't know. But the bottom line is there seems to be no real will to form a peace on this one.
So, in your view, what's going to actually happen in Gaza and in Ukraine?
Okay, go back to Gaza. No, I'm sorry. The Palestinians completely lost me on the 7th of October. By the way, one of the reasons I'm so pro-Israel, funny enough, I was writing about it today. It's a week before my 12th birthday, 5th of September 1972, and I came down in the morning to watch the Olympics, and it all been cancelled because some Black September lot had taken over the Olympic Village and taken 11 Israelis hostages. So from the age of 12, nearly 12 in 1972, this very day, I've always been fiercely pro-Israel because they're a bunch of knuckle dragging Neanderthals, from what I can see. Nasty, violent. The way they indoctrinate their kids against Jews and Israelis is absolutely disgusting. And to sum it all up, some of the Palestinian Hamas leadership, I should say, have turned around and said they will have the 7th of October again and again and again. These people deserve nothing. The Palestinians, in Gaza, should not be allowed to run a bath, let alone a country. And the world sits around putting up with their antics and their victim blaming when they are the violent aggressors.
So, how is it going to end up? What do you think is going to happen?
I got a funny feeling. I think the Gazans may drift away. I think they would try and move to European countries. It doesn't appear that many of the Arab countries nearby want to take any in. Some, I think Australia's taken quite a few in. Britain's taken a few in, and but and perhaps some will go to Jordan. Some might end up in Lebanon, which is going to be a disaster for the Lebanese Christians. Some might end up in Syria as well.
You think a couple million people will leave and rehome
Yeah,
themselves elsewhere?
yeah, I think they will do. There might be a core element that stay in the area, but I really think that they will melt into Europe and the Middle East.
Okay.
I can't, it's an absolute hellhole at the moment. There's no buildings. It's all rubble. There's nothing there for them to live for.
And what about Ukraine? How will that turn out?
I think Donald Trump is busting his balls, for want of a better phrase, trying to get peace. Now, who is the belligerent people here? I don't know. First of all, he started out, I think Trump was pointing his finger at Zelensky, first of all, but now he's turned his ire and his anger to Putin. Perhaps these guys, as you know, it's the conspiracy theory. They don't want peace. They just want to continue the war so they can keep making money.
Tell us a bit more about China. You've touched on them a couple of times.
Well, China, I see China as being a cross between Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. I believe it is the world's currently the most evil country. The way they're treating the Uyghur Muslims is an absolute disgrace. It is literally ethnic cleansing stroke genocide. It reminds me of the Japanese rape of Nanking in 1937. The bestial way that women are being forcibly sterilized, forced abortions. Chinese men are raping and impregnating Uyghur Muslim women. They're destroying all their mosques. It really is, in a sense. You would compare that to maybe Kristall Night in 1938 in Nazi Germany. Those kind of attitudes. It's those kind of attitudes which persist to this very day, and it really is a disgrace that China has been challenged on this and being called out.
If you were handed the keys and told you're running Britain now, what things would you do? What are the first three things you'd do?
Right. First thing I would do, I would order the border force to take all the migrants back to Calais. And if they disobey an order, I'd fire them all, and I'd ask for volunteers to man the ships. The second thing I would do, I would have a bonfire of Tony Blair's, Gordon Brown, and David Cameron's legislation, not least the Human Rights Act of 1998. We would immediately leave the ECHR, and I would seek a trade deal with Donald Trump, which we were offered one in 2018. Theresa May turned it down, and I'd be far more confrontational with the EU. I think the Channel migrant crisis has been manufactured by them as a punishment beating for leaving the EU, and we would be completely impotent in trying to fix it out. The other thing I would do, yeah, indeed, another thing I would do, I would have a balanced monthly budget. In the context that we're nearly £3 trillion in debt. And to anybody who's not overly into economics, it's a bit like being salaried at £40,000 a year, and you're £40,000 in debt. So the monthly budget has to be balanced, and we have to pay some of our debt off, and we have to get rid of huge swathes of the government that are completely unneeded. Quangos, the digital thing. Digital ministry as well, and culture, that has to go. There has to be mass redundancies of civil servants, and until we can pay our way, and we're in a position for tax cuts.
And all that aside, because you don't have the keys, what's actually going to happen over the next 3.5 or so years?
I got a funny feeling that there's going to be an economic collapse in this country. Rachel Reeves will have no choice but to take on some of the policies I've suggested. She will have no choice. There will have to be massive cuts in government spending. And I think she's eyeing up the welfare bill at the moment, which, to be fair, I'm not exactly against. It seems to me that Britain's welfare state is less of a safety net and more of a hammer.
Yeah, too big.
So that's all got to go. But I would do it anyway. One of the few good example, how the civil service are particularly in the way. And to give an example, Dominic Cummings, when he worked with Michael Gove at the Education Ministry, he identified 12 out of 15 civil servants who he thought were standing in the way, and he had them sacked.
Yeah.
And the net result was Britain now has amongst the best reading and mathematical skills in schools in the Western world. So the Koreans and the Japanese that beat us.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, so I have the keys. Look at what Javier Milei's done in Argentina. That's my template.
He's amazing, huh? He's really something.
8% GDP growth this year.
Yeah, he's quite something. But if you've been an economics professor and a real whiz all your life, you kind of know what to do, as opposed to the people that we have here, who many say is just the least qualified cabinet that's ever existed.
Well, exactly, yeah. Well, the thing always surprises me about academic economists these days. I think Milei's from the Austrian School of Economics, which I adhere to as well. Absolute minimal government, absolute minimal taxation, and and it's worked. I think his GDP growth this year is going to be 8%.
8%.
Phenomenal.
You said, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Well, Dave, thank you very much. And folks, that's Dave Atherton, a very popular guy, and he's just told you how the world ought to run, especially this little green island. And it's a question of whether you want to believe him or not, or if you think you've got better ideas, drop us a line, subscribe to our show, The Gospel According to Dr. Roger. Just go to Dr. Gr. Roger Gewolb, G-E-W-O-L-B, and drop us a comment on YouTube or whatever, and tell us how you'd like to run things. And hey, if it's good enough, we'll put you on the show. And Dave, thank you very much.
Roger, thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Sharing your wine with us in a beautiful park setting.
I've got my vape as well. So
I'll only get worried if I hear that you actually slept on that bench tonight. But other than that, you look great. And we will certainly have you back again.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Anytime.
you. Thank you.
Cheers.